In fact, the research shows that if we don't understand immediately what something is about, and we don't feel like we understand it enough to want to know more, we are negatively curious. So not only are we not intrigued, we are repelled by it.
Welcome to the Agents of Change, the podcast experience you've been waiting for your entire marketing career. Search, social, mobile, AI, blockchain, and neuromarketing. These are the Agents of Change, and so are you. Digital marketing success awaits, and your transformation begins now.
Welcome to another episode of the Agents of Change podcast, the podcast that helps you reach and engage more of your ideal customers online. My name is Rich Brooks. I'm your host. This is episode 606, powered by Flight New Media. One of the recurring themes of this podcast that's all about digital marketing, is messaging, the story we tell and how we tell it in a way that will resonate with our audience. Whether your channel is your website, social media, email, a podcast, the stage, or the sky. Skywriters, right? If your message doesn't resonate with your ideal customers, the cash register isn't going to ring, no matter the platform, no matter the quality of your products. Which is why it's always good to have this week's guest back for her third go-round on the podcast. And that doesn't include the fact that she spoke at our virtual summit last year and has headlined and keynoted our conference. Before we get to that, last week I did a local presentation called Building Your First AI Assistant, an evolution of the presentation I gave at CEX a couple of months back. And for those of you who don't know, an AI assistant is a custom GPT or a Claude project or a Gemini gem, just more robust tools that allow you to do things at scale or do repetitive tasks over and over again. One of the new sections of this presentation is about the evolution of how people, you and me, prompt. I still remember my first prompt. Cue the wavy lines on your TV set as if we were looking at a flashback, which was, what should I sell my PS4 for? And I got back an answer that I found was really robust, and it talked about different ways to price it out and going to Craigslist and going to Facebook Marketplace and maybe even talking to my local store about a trade-in program. I was blown away. That prompt might be considered to be or called a simple prompt or a basic prompt. And it worked perfectly well. But over time, as you start using these tools more, you want more consistency in your outputs. You want the voice to be the same. You want to get the same type of answer every time you put in your prompt. And that's where frameworks start to come in. And I remember the first framework that I was introduced to was called Role and Goal, where you basically tell the AI its role. You're the CEO of a major company, or you are a social media manager, or you are a pediatrician, right? You give it a role and then you give it a goal, what you want the AI to do. And by narrowing that focus, you can get more consistent, reliable results. Beyond role and goal, there are other alphabet soup type acronyms that do basically the same thing, but more. One of the popular ones is called RICCE or Ricky, depending on how you want to look at it or how you want to pronounce it. RICCE, which stands for role, instructions, which is what you want it to do, context, which is you give it some background information, constraints, which is where you talk about length and tone of voice and whether you want it to display in a table or anything else you might have, and then examples, where you can literally just give it some examples of the output you're looking for. And that I call a strategic prompt. And then finally, you graduate to what I call contextual prompts, where we take that strategic prompt and we partner it with documents that we attach. And these could be Word docs, PDFs, JPEGs, and so forth as attachment to our prompts. And that gives us even more robust results because now we're giving it output examples so it knows the kind of outputs we're looking for. Now, I shared this as part of the presentation, not to say that then you graduate to AI assistants as if they were better, but just that a strong understanding of better prompting leads to creation of better AI assistants. And it's not like I left prompting behind once I started building AI assistants. They're different tools meant for different tasks. So some of my more favorite or more used AI assistants includes a podcast producer, which basically takes my transcripts at the end of an interview and creates a lot of the blog posts and links and output that basically the podcast assets that I have for the show. And that saves me a lot of time. That's one example. I also have another one that helps me write the scripts for the local TV show that I appear on once a month as the tech guru. So these are assistants that help me, but I would say that it's not like I look down on prompting. In fact, I probably spend more time when I'm working with ChatGPT or Claude doing simple or strategic prompting than I do these AI assistants. The trick is understanding which tool is best for which task, which comes from experimenting with these LLMs and seeing what their outputs are and seeing which ones serve you best. Anyways, that's it for my AI field notes of the week, just sharing some of my thoughts or workflows on artificial intelligence and how you can use it in your business. I hope you found this helpful. Now, on with the show. Part message designer, part English to English translator, and now part doctoral student, my next guest helps leaders quickly craft their case for long-lasting changes in thinking and behavior. In addition to her work in and for major organizations such as Harvard Medical School, Fidelity Investments, and DataBox, she's a judge and mentor for the Harvard Innovation Labs, a professional advisor at the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship, and has spent over 10 years as the idea strategist for one of only 9 legacy-level TEDx events in the world. She was named to the Thinker 50 radar in 2022 and is the author of 2 books, Find Your Red Thread, Make Your Big Ideas Irresistible, and Say What They Can't Unhear, The 9 Principles of Lasting Change. She lives in Boston with her husband, 2 sons, 2 brindle greyhounds, Hazel and Walnut. And today we're going to be talking about creating unforgettable messages with Tamsen Webster. Tamsen, welcome back to the show.
I'm delighted to return. Rich, how are you?
I'm doing great. This is your 3rd time on the show, as far as my notes told me. So I'm really excited about that.
I am too. It's always good to talk to a Mainer. That's what I think.
There you go. Absolutely.
The day is, I'm married to one as well. So I get
I know
of talking with Mainers, but it's the more Mainers, the better.
Absolutely. And, I love when Tom comes back home because I always see his Facebook posts and they always just kind of like resonate for me. So that's always great.
Love that.
So what is it, Tamsen, about communications and messaging that speaks to you so deeply?
Well, words are pretty much the only currency that we have for ideas, right? At some level, we've got to take these big, beautiful, abstract things that are in our heads, and the only avenue really that we can come back to over and over again. I mean, we can use diagrams and whatever, but when we're talking to people about it, we have to use words. And what I am so drawn to about communication and messaging as part of that is that seems to be so often where great ideas or important changes fail, is actually at that first point of explanation. And based on my work and my experience, that's a solvable problem. And so that's really what I'm all about. I've been focused for 25 years on one big question. And fundamentally, that's how do we accelerate the understanding and adoption of new ideas? And since words and communication tend to be the way that we do that, that's what I've been fascinated by, but not the copywriting end, the way back in how do we process those words and that information in the first place.
Love it. Love it. So you have a relatively new book out, and I noticed that the dedication is
it's been out for a year. I think
a year.
Yeah, it just has a little birthday.
Excellent. I noticed that the dedication is to Tom, your husband, and it just says ding. And I'm wondering if that's some sort of inside joke that the rest of us don't get.
So, I mean, it is. So I talk about ding moments in the book, right? And I even open the book with saying, some people have those life-changing moments. They think of them as a light bulb. I've always heard it as a sound like ding. Oh, there it is. The original, before it got edited, dedication to Tom was actually Who Always Rings My Bell. And then I was like, and then I reconsidered it and just replaced it with ding because I was like, not everyone's that might get interpreted the wrong way. And yeah, so I just left it with ding because he's the supplier of any number of life-changing moments. So
yeah, that makes sense. And this is an all ages show. So I appreciate that. As a kid from the 70s, of course, when I hear Ring My Bell, the song comes to mind. So that's
right.
the first thing I think of.
That was, I mean, I thought it was clever. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. It's just like,
Not everybody's as clever as me, right?
Shall we say? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the new book is all about creating unforgettable messages, things that people can't unhear. So
Yeah.
what does that look like in real life?
Well, I mean, I think the reason why I wanted to write the book was, my first book was very much a how-to book. It is very much the process I use to help people make their messages more understandable as a path to being irresistible. And with this book, I really wanted to put a warning shot across the bow, put my stake in the ground of like, listen, there's things that are really necessary to understand about how people respond to change, process messages, all of that can make a huge difference in the success or failure of that message, first of all, and whether or not that message leads to action, one-time action, short-term action, or long-term, even transformational change. And the more that I work with leaders and change agents and agents of change, wink, wink, and communicators, marketers, whatever that might be, the more I realize that I don't know anybody who feels like they really have enough time to have to keep trying to find people, right? Or that, I don't know about you, but if I put a message out there that's designed to create a change, I don't want to have to keep putting it out there. I want something that's really going to stick with people so that as much as possible, change, true change, meaning sustained change, becomes inevitable. And it just seemed like that information wasn't out there in a kind of easy to manage, all in one place kind of resource. And so that's what I wanted to create, was just like, here's everything you need to know about people. If you want to create the conditions for change, here you go. That's what it is.
Why do you think that so many of us struggle to communicate in a way that truly lands with our audience and causes that long-lasting change?
So, I mean, there's a number of ways to answer this. I would say is that what I have found to be most intriguing lately, and it's definitely at the heart of my doctoral research, is that we only speak to one of the two brains that we have. And what I mean, people might be going, wait, I only have one brain. And that is true. But whenever we hear or read or experience a message in some way, our brains are processing it in two simultaneous ways. And that's really important to know because they are deeply interactive with each other. And these two ways I like to call them, we have like an analytical process, an analytical brain. That's the one we think we're listening to a lot of the times. It's the one that if we have an inner monologue, it's the one that's talking to us. It's the one that's looking for data, evidence. It's the one that's trying to pick things apart. And then we have, in contrast with that, an automatic brain. And I group into that not just emotion, but also intuition and our kind of experience, instinctive reactions to things that we're not thinking about at all, right? If you touch something hot, you're going to recoil. You did not consciously think about that. You did not analyze your behavior in that moment. Now, what's really important about these two is that automatic brain, while they're operating at the same time, that automatic brain responds much, much faster, even to the same information. And we've seen a lot of examples of this lately where somebody will say something and somebody will challenge them on it. And then what do? They give them all the data and the information and all the rational explanation for why this other position is right or wrong or whatever. But if the other person's automatic brain doesn't agree with that data, doesn't understand it, if it conflicts with what they already believe, it absolutely shuts down the receptivity to that message, at least for a little while, right? And that to me is deadly for any message. I mean, you can't get to change if you don't get to action. You can't get to action if you don't have some kind of level of agreement. If you can't get to agreement, if you don't have understanding. And all of that means we have to go all the way back to what will both of those processes understand and agree. So to your question, what I find is that we pay attention to one brain or the other and forget that they work together. Meaning we give data and evidence without accounting for the fact of how that automatic brain in that other person might respond. If this conflicts with what they believe, if they don't understand it because I'm speaking about it at some level of expertise or using words they don't understand. The alternative is that, and this I've seen a lot, let's say in the last 10 or 15 years, where everybody has gone gaga over story as if it's like the end all be all of everything. And it's really strong. Don't get me wrong. But like, they're like, well, if we just get them emotionally connected and attached, yes. And the analytic brain is still going to kick in at some point. And so you can move people with the message, you can connect them with the message. But if they can't ultimately justify some shift in thinking or behavior based on that message, based on that emotional connection in a way that they feel like when challenged, that they would stick with it. Again, it's not as effective as it could be if we didn't talk to both. So that's currently like the big banner I'm flying, is that we've got to be able to think about how do we talk to both brains, and that we're making sure that our message works in both of those ways so that we maximize our probability of success.
I love it and I hate it. And I hate it because marketing is often about getting people to change their thoughts or behaviors. And it sounds like you've just asked me to do twice as much work as I've been doing all along, talking to these two different brains. So share with me a little bit of the insight of how do I simultaneously talk to those two different sides of the brain, so the id and ego, or whatever you want to call it, in a way that's kind of coherent.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So there's some good news with all of this, right? The first good news is that both brains love logic. They love an if then. They love a cause and effect. They love a stimulus and response. So what that means is very simply, and by the way, you as a marketer, you as a salesperson, as a message creator, wouldn't come up with a message without knowing both of those things. You wouldn't say, we have this product, I don't know why people would want it. And you wouldn't go into the market saying, we know the market has this problem and we've got nothing for it, right? So all I'm suggesting is that one of the biggest things that we can make is make sure that both elements of, if you want this outcome, market, prospect, what audience, whatever, then this is the approach, right? Then take this approach. At the very least, and by the way, a lot of messages would fail right there, make sure that people understand both sides of that and that both sides are presented within fairly short order, right? So again, we can be creative with campaigns and whatever, but we don't want to leave people guessing as to why would I care, which is kind of this if you want this piece, the if, nor do you want to keep them guessing about the then. Right? What is your answer to that? Like, you can't just keep dialing up the problem and just not offer people an answer to that. Now, the second thing is to make sure that we're talking to both brains is make sure that when you are talking about both the if and the then, that you are talking about it, in terms and in concepts people already understand. Now, one of my absolute I get so annoyed with it is that when marketers, advertisers, and let me be clear, I've worked in marketing firms and in advertising agencies where they decide, let's be mysterious and let's invite people to come check this out. By and large, that's not how curiosity works, especially in an environment where the world is super, super busy and we've got a lot of different things coming at us. In fact, the research shows that if we don't understand immediately what something is about, and we don't feel like we understand it enough to want to know more, we are negatively curious. So not only are we not intrigued, we are repelled by it, right? So that's why when I'm working with clients, we're talking about using the audience language for both the explanation of what it is, the outcome that they're looking for, and tell me in clear language what this thing will get me. Don't tell me to buy the iPod, one of my favorite examples. Tell me I'm going to get 1,000 songs in my pocket, right? Because then I'm like, oh, if I say hello to iPod, then I'll get that. Now, the last piece to make sure you're talking to both is to explain why, right? And why that's the case. Now, what was brilliant about the iPod tagline of, say hello to iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket, is that in that case, they allowed people, it was built in such a way that people filled in that why on their own, right? well, 1,000 songs compared to what the other alternatives were at the time, that was meaningful to certain people. Their brain, their automatic brain, mind you, immediately goes, ooh, 1,000 songs, variety, or 1,000 songs, control, or 1,000 songs, mood matching, or 1,000 songs. I can take my entire library with me, right? Same thing for in your pocket. This world right now is way too busy, I think, to leave so much up to chance, particularly if you're introducing like an organizational change or something like that. So again, I would suggest that at the very least, you identify for yourselves what is your organization's justification for that then, right? For that approach to answering that question. And if that justification is, and I know it's going to sound weird, not data, but the belief underneath the data, right? That's how that automatic brain goes, oh, well, that's true. Yep, it's okay. And now that you put them together, because they both love logic, they're like, oh, they both say almost at the same time, I can see why that would be something I'd be interested in. And to me, that's the golden moment, right? We've got that one, like we've just kind of created that space where someone goes, I'd like to know more. And from that point, now they are operating with agency and their own curiosity to explore. And it's our jobs as marketers to make sure then that they get the data from there. But we've passed the danger zone of having that automatic brain rejected outright.
How do we know if our messages are only firing on one cylinder in this case? Because a lot of times we think we're clever, or a lot of times we might think we're sending out the right kind of message, but I'm guessing that many times marketers and thought leaders and communicators are missing that mark. Is there a way that we can take a look at a campaign or a tagline or something else and just be like, this isn't done yet. This needs another layer?
Oh, 100%. Yes. Glad you asked. I don't talk about this in the book, the newer book, because it hadn't been fully fleshed out yet, but I can answer it now. Excellent. Which is so the kind of diagnostic test, and I also use this as a framework for building messages, is something I call the ITBA. So it stands for if, then, because, and it really represents not only the core claim that you're making, if you want this, then this approach, or then we believe this approach, right? If we're talking about from the organizational perspective. And then the because and the and are those justifications, are those kind of hard to argue with principles about why that approach would make sense. So just saying we were doing this with the iPod, for instance, and I do say that these are steps that should happen before you start copywriting an ad. The kind of implied question for the iPod is like, what's a better way to carry my music with me, right? If you think about 21 years ago, 24, oh my gosh, 24 years ago, like what were the options? All right, then iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket, which let's say that represented for them maximum variety in the most portable space, right? So really what we're looking at is variety and portability. So the because and the and, using the ITBA, we'd say, is there a very difficult for our ideal customer audience to argue with justification for variety being important to a better way to carry music with you? And so you could say something like most of their ideal customers would agree that the more of your library you could take with you, the better, for whatever reason, right? Now you can plug in, the more control, the more options, whatever. And the something very similar would happen with portability as well, right? The more portability, the better, or the smaller something is, the more places it can go. So therefore, right, if you want a better way to carry your music with you, then maximize variety in as portable a package as possible, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Why? Because the more variety, the better. The smaller something is, the more places it can go. So I say that if, then, because, and is important to there's two ways that you can use it diagnostically. Number one is to say, where are we missing something? Like maybe we don't have a then. Maybe we don't actually understand and haven't made explicit our belief-based justification about why this approach is the right way to go. But the second thing to check for is exactly that. to what extent does our ideal audience agree that that's valuable? So number one, this shifts a lot of times, when I'm working with clients on what that if is. So I like to frame it and help people find it by shaping it as a question. So that if represents a question that is being actively and knowingly asked by the audience right now. It's an outcome they are actively and knowingly pursuing, meaning it's not some unknown problem. You may see it as not the right problem, but it is the one they're looking for right now, right? Like, let's say, take it to a B2B example. They're looking for making sure that their leaders are equipped to make some kind of major strategic shift, right? That's an active problem for a lot of folks, and they probably are trying to find answers to it. And it probably doesn't necessarily have one right answer. There's a lot of different ways to make sure. But let's say that, like my client, Vince Molinaro, that you have a very specific opinion about what's really necessary for that. And for him, it's about scaling accountability, right? So just using these things as I was talking about before, number one, he's not saying, what's the best way to grow our business? Because that may be a question that people are asking, but his leadership training programs and coaching, there's a lot of if-thens that have to happen, right? Before that feels, before our automatic brain goes believable, right? Plausible. So we tighten it to very, very close to what that thing is. And then notice, rather than saying his product name, which would be like one of his products is the leadership contract, we describe it in human words that people can intuitively understand. We need to scale accountability. If you agree with just that claim by itself, great. You would ask how, and the answer would be Vince in the leadership contract, because their stuff delivers on that. But if you're like, all right, but okay, fine, but why? Because that's where the analytical brain pops in. He would say, well, because we leadership contract believe that accountability is the ownership of outcomes. So if you want to make sure your folks are equipped to make this change successfully, wouldn't you agree? We need something that drives ownership. That's accountability. That's why we need accountability. Now, we could just stop there. And if he was like the kind of person who would throw competitors under the bus, he might say, and some of our competitors actually also have this. But if you only focus on accountability, what's the problem? You might only get one or two people in your organization that are accountable. And again, we believe, statement that it's hard to argue with, that success requires execution at scale. So we need accountability, but we need it at scale, right? Now, how do we do that? And if somebody agrees, and again, we've designed it for the person whose mindset is already leaning that way, that person would be like, yeah, okay, in principle, I agree with you. Then we kind of fall into our normal marketing sales behavior and say, okay, now explain to me how. And now we can start talking about features, benefits, all of that stuff, because that's the additional data that moves something from possible in principle to possible in practice. Yes, not only do I believe this is possible, I believe that you can do this with me and that we can do this at our organization. So
awesome.
Those kind of two levels, is everything there? And is everything actually something that your audience wants and would agree with?
So I love that idea. And I'd like to think that I am in tune with my audience enough that I can interpret that and I can guess at that. But how do we know that we're right? Or is it just a matter of throwing spaghetti against the wall or trying something out in the marketplace to see if it works?
Yeah. So this is what I have found to be one of the most countercultural things about this approach, because it actually has, other than that question, has nothing to do with the audience. And here's what I mean. So I'm dipping way back into the management literature, but back in the 50s or 60s, I think Drucker talked about what he called the theory of the business. And what he described as a theory of the business was essentially kind of the almost instinctive operating code system of the business about why it did what it did in its particular way. That's my language for it. But, and in essence, the organization operates on a theory of if we do this, then this will happen because, right? So this is not something that if you want this to be sustainable within your organization or within yourself long term, can be geared on on chasing the market. This has to be what you all believe is a valid question to answer, and that you validly believe that you've got and this is the reason why, in terms your audience would understand why you believe so strongly in it. Now, the test of what does the audience care about is important. Like, I kind of reveal that, I kind of use that as the way in when I'm working with my clients on this, because if not enough people have that question, well, then you don't have a viable product or service, right? And so that's important, but it's not about chasing the market. It's about understanding how to draw the connection between what the market is looking for and what you all do, whether like you can't even help it, right? Because it is exactly what you do. So when I'm working with clients on this, the process that anybody can follow, by the way, is you start with that question, because you're like, okay, yay, those are like our ideal client would have that question. Oftentimes I'll refer to it even as think of it like a qualifying question. If they don't have that question, they're probably not your people, right? If they're not wondering, how do we equip our leaders? If they're not wondering, like my client data box, how do we make our data more usable? And you've got a data presentation and processing platform, let's save everybody some time, right? And then from there, it's by saying, okay, that's a valid question. We believe we can answer that. And we believe this aspect of this thing, whatever it is, I call it a core component, is absolutely necessary to answering that question. And people only we, or pretty much only we, are paying attention to this aspect of it, right? So Vince was really paying attention to, for instance, accountability. He actually makes a clear contrast with Amy Edmondson and psychological safety. It's like, a lot of people think it's this. I believe it's accountability. Now, I'm not saying he's right, but the people who agree with him, those are his people. If people are 100% in the psychological safety camp, they're going to go with a provider that's that way, right? So what I come down to is to say, we, individuals, organizations, must know, to me, it's so core that we understand the actual operating strategy, kind of this intuitive go-to strategy about why we're doing what we're doing, not just Simon Sinek, we've got a purpose, but why are we specifically taking this approach to solving this question? And what question are we solving? And why are we taking that approach? And so what I find over again is that what you end up with is something that will resonate with the right market. First of all, I've seen this now I've been testing this particular model for 2.5 years. The second thing, this is like a free prize inside, Seth Godin style, is that often what you end up with is the truly distinctive aspects of your approach. And not only that, it's defensible, because part of what we're looking for in those pieces that we're going to support with the because and the and are things that the audience wouldn't predict or wouldn't expect as a default part of the answer, right? So when I'm working with clients on this, I take a whole bunch of words just off the table. I'm like, you can't tell me it's high quality. No. Why would someone buy something that's crappy, right? You need to tell me what about your approach ensures high quality, right? And then be able to defend that, right? So that to me is it flips it all around and says, actually, the very first step that we need to take is, why are we even doing this? Why are we even doing this way? Because if we don't understand, how could they ever? And if we don't believe it passionately, why would they ever? So to me, this is really the first step in message design, is understanding kind of this internal rationale, which I capture in the IPA. And then from there, then you can start to wrap market language, copywriting, all that kind of good stuff around it.
It sounds like we have to have a pretty good sense of self and understand what our premise is and what our perspective is when we're bringing it to the marketplace. But do you ever find that some of your clients are just too close, that to their own messages that they can't kind of articulate it to an outside audience?
Yeah.
And then what do you do?
I mean, that's what I'm there for, but I don't believe it's just me. I mean, I don't believe it just requires me. I mean, so the first thing is, to quote the folks behind, a field known as action science, like the science of how intention turns into action. Talk is data. And there is also something really powerful about talk, which is another kind of phenomenon in psychology and learning known as the self-explanatory effect, which is the effect of the self-explanation is that for whatever reason, people who work to explain something out loud to themselves or to other people come to understand and be able to identify better the holes in their own argument or their own position, and or they are able to understand where there are gaps in their understanding. So that's part of why, whether somebody's working with me or not, I'm like, this must be a discussion. This must be a discussion because we humans are wired to make really strong versions of our own case and simultaneously wired to be able to pick apart yours in like 2 seconds flat. So this is why talk to, even if that other person is Claude or ChatGPT, right? Or Perplexity, that's really helpful because you can say, why would somebody disagree? And actually, given how those large language models are trained, they're really good at that, saying where would someone pick it apart? So that's where I would say that's really important. And part of what I'm working with when we do that because in the and like I said, the closer those are to natural laws, to things that anybody would agree with, right? And again, if somebody wouldn't agree with it, you're like, I do not need to know that person. That person would never be our client if they didn't agree with that. Is that it kind of guarantees some level of common ground. Now, the biggest danger of any of this is simply that someone understands you completely and prioritizes something else.
Mm.
And to me, I'd rather know that. And I'd rather know it in the first introduction of that idea from like a salesperson's mouth or like somewhere in the body copy on my homepage than after I've spent months chasing down somebody who fundamentally thinks that the answer lies somewhere else, right? And so to me, I'm continuing to discover the aspects of why it works and what else happens as a result. But to me, that's another really important hidden benefit that not only can it help you get to yes faster, it can help you get to no faster. And I think that's really for any resource constrained communicator, and show me one that isn't, that can sometimes be just as important.
Absolutely. In fact, I was literally just telling a prospect today, I don't care if you say yes or no. I just want you to say one of them so I can go on with my life. I put it nicer than that, but that was basically my message to that person.
Yeah.
You mentioned the pressures of time and things like that. And obviously not everybody can work with you and not everybody, can focus just on this. If people are listening and what you said resonates with them and they want to get started, what's kind of the first step that they could take so they would make progress on this approach today?
Well, I'm happy to say that there is a ungated handout that they can start with. And all they need to do is go to getthehandout.com. Still my proudest URL purchase, getthehandout.com. It'll take you right to a PDF that all you need to do is download it and you will have your own copy to get started. So I call it the compact case, but it'll get you started on kind of crafting an ITBA. It gives you blanks so that you can fill in, and there's step-by-step instructions underneath with little check boxes about, hey, is it doing this? And it's frankly something you could probably just upload into Claude or ChatGPT and say, help me figure this out. And honestly, I'm totally fine with that because, you asked me at the beginning, why do I care about this? It's because who's got time, right, to waste at this point? And to me, that's I wanted to make getting started with this as easy as possible. So that's the place. It's free. You don't have to give me any information. And even once a month, I do a free office hours live, just so if you've got questions about what you filled out, I'm happy to answer them for you. So, I just believe so strongly in in message design at all, being a core business and life skill, that I don't want to put it behind barriers. And that's, yeah. So getthehandout.com, and no, you cannot buy the URL from me.
Awesome. And we'll have those links in the show notes. For people who do want to learn more, maybe end up working with you, but also just follow you online, where can we send them?
Yeah, I think the business center is messagedesigninstitute.com. There's information there. You can sign up for the newsletter. That's where you see a lot of these ideas start to burble and pop first. That's where I announce things like the office hours and where you can sign up for that. But there's also a list of different ways and different formats of working with me/us at a whole different bunch of different price points, so that you can figure out what works best for you, your organization, and your budget.
Awesome. Tamsen, this has been great. I want to thank you for your time and appreciate all you shared with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, Tamsen shared a lot of great information with us today. And if you felt overwhelmed at any point, not to worry, we've got you covered. There is the audio and the full transcript and a blog post and all the show notes that Tamsen shared with us. You just need to head on over to theagentsofchange.com/606. You'll get all of that, including links to Tamsen's handout, which will help you with your messaging. Listen, your marketing doesn't need to be louder. It needs to speak to both sides of your audience's brain. When you create messages that work with how people actually process information, instead of fighting against it, you're not just changing minds, you're becoming an agent of change.
Don't miss another thrilling episode of the Agents of Change podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform.